middlemen. They take a 30% commission. So you have hundreds of billions of dollars disappearing somewhere. And I followed the thread, and I realized that, the Japanese government is totally corrupt. Everything we're reading about in the Japanese newspapers is a lie, right? And I wrote 2 chapters of a book that was going to be so explosive, and it was in English, that I would have to leave Japan or be killed. I sent them to my agent. The next day, I got a call from the granddaughter of the Meiji Emperor. Out of the blue. She says, you should not get the Yakuza angry, right? And she told me that a goddess had called to intervene and tell me. And it turns out this goddess was the Japanese security police. They'd obviously been, looking at my email. But they said, you don't understand what's really going on. And she gave me this Von Kleist video, in plain sight. And as soon as she gave me that, I said, oh, no, this is this anti-Semitic nonsense. I'm going to watch it. How come this lady, she's a princess, how come she believes stuff like this? But she kept bugging me. I watched it, and, I've been an investigative journalist for 20 years, and I know the difference between true information and BS. And so I started a long trail of research. And once I was sure this was a government plot, the next thing was, oh, my God, how could it be so big? I mean, this is just too huge to comprehend. The amount of people that would have to be involved is vast. And then the truth is so big and so horrendous that people decipher it. But I basically think you have to go all the way back to, as I said, Hammurabi, the original Babylonian dictator, and the cult of leadership. And the Freemasons, their history goes right back there. It's a collective of slave drivers. These are the people who originally literally did have people make pyramids, and they controlled them by controlling their food supply. And now they control them by controlling their money supply. And their history is so long, and their techniques are so sophisticated. But, folklore has been aware of these people. They've called them different names over the years. Beelzebub, Mammon, Set, Lucifer, Satan. But there's nothing otherworldly about it or metaphysical. These are a real group of people, an ancient sect of Babylonian slave drivers. And that's the hard truth. And they want to enslave the entire planet, and that's what they're trying to do. And we must stop them. People have to know. This is how deep you have to go into history. I believe Jesus Christ was a rebel against these people, and he was one of their enemies because he said all men are created equal and free before God, and you should love thy neighbor, stuff like that, and take care of the poor.
Other great beings have issued the same message, of course.
Absolutely. Muhammad, I think, kicked them out of the Islamic world, basically, and that's why, Tsarist Russia fought them for a very long time, and now they're free again. There's a lot of free countries. Italy kicked them out with the P2 scandal. That's a great scandal to look at to see exactly how these people operate.
People over in the States don't even know anything about that. That was a monumental development, a monumental watershed in Italian history. Hammurabi, Abraham, secret Jewish sect, Zionist sect, becoming an Illuminati sect. What about that? How do you're going all the way back. What else
you have to go, so you follow the thread. Moses, what he did, if you think about it, I mean, this is my understanding of it, is they dumped a lot of poisonous red mineral in the Nile River, right?
Okay.
And that poisoned the crops. That's why you have the story of the Nile running red. It was a slave revolt. It was a fight between two different slave drivers or whatever, and he used the eco-terrorism, and he slaughtered lots of Egyptians. They eventually lost, and they fled into what is now Israel, and they were then kicked out by the Romans and scattered all over the place.
This is the same group, Ben, that's been kicked out by virtually every developed society on record.
Yeah, so the Jews are there. Many of them have been enslaved by them, but it's not a Jewish thing, really. It's more secret than that. They're hidden even from the Jews.
Right. Well, we study World War II and the involvement of Zionism with the Holocaust. We see it quite clearly. Stand by just for a minute or two. We have to take a break. Come right back with Mr. Benjamin Fulford, live from Tokyo. Okay, let's get right back to Mr. Ben Fulford talking about some pretty amazing things. His great-grandfather, a benefactor of Nikola Tesla, and was murdered for his efforts. Tesla, it is said by some, was kept basically in the last several decades of his life almost a prisoner in a way. All of his work was watched, and it's a pretty unfortunate way to end a brilliant life like that, one of the great men of history.
Yes, the 20th century was a total tragedy. I mean, it should have been, humanity was on the verge of something like a Cambrian explosion. When you have unlimited free energy, the possibilities are so mind-boggling that, you can't even fully understand, but it would be just wonderful. I mean, it'd be like everyone's a billionaire. I mean, it's just...
Well, the potential was there, you're right, to create the beginning, and in fact establish a golden age for humanity in the last century, but instead, how many millions? 100 million died in wars, at least? At
least 100 million. The Americans killed, I don't know how many tens of millions after the war. I mean, it was and more to the point, they suppressed technology.
Oh, yeah. There's so much tech. We have had videos recently, Ben, of one man who used to own a television station able to pull hydrogen right out of salt water and burn it right on the spot. I mean, the energy is all there.
Yeah, the Japanese had that technology 30 years ago.
Right.
Another technology they have that's been suppressed is you can generate unlimited energy by taking advantage of the difference in temperature between the surface of the ocean and the bottom.
Yeah, it's called geothermal exchange, right?
Well, no, it's like you pump methane down to the bottom of the ocean, it turns into liquid, then it comes up and it turns into gas again and generates infinite electricity and rivers worth of fresh water. And
the same thing on land with geothermal. But yeah, there are so many out there, and they're clearly all being mothballed and locked away. They have no plans for us other than slavery. That's their plan.
Yeah. If you talk to that guy who burned water in Florida, just see what's happened to him since. I bet he's had some pretty thuggish visitors.
Well, they almost all seemingly do. Some have died, unusually early deaths as well. Others just vanish, and you hope that they have not been killed. But yeah, there's so many stories like this I've seen over the years. They were pulling electricity out of the ground in the 1870s and 80s, for goodness sakes. I mean, it's there.
It's a crime. I mean, they're trying to lobotomize the human race and stop human.
They're doing a pretty good job of it so far. The Chinese, by the way, had, as you know, I don't know if you remember the year, but I think it was 2001, a goal of putting a television set in every household in China, because that is the instrument of oppression, of manipulation, of control, of conditioning, of shaping, of molding.
Sure, but you know what? The Chinese have their own idea for democracy, right? Which you cannot totally write it off. What they're saying is democracy using paper every 4 years is kind of low-tech and out of date. You can have real-time live democracy on the Internet through opinion polls and through chat rooms, and that's a much better way of making sure public opinion is reflected in public policy.
Well, it's electronic. It's all something that can be manipulated if it's electronic. But you raise a good point, and if it were somehow to be guaranteed to be legitimate, it would be fascinating. Let me ask you a question. What do you and your backers think of Vladimir Putin and Russia standing tall against the Rothschilds over the issue of the missiles in Europe and other East-West problems? They've refused now to extradite the Russian businessman who the British and Berezovsky and the Rothschilds say was the murderer of Litvinenko with polonium-210. They won't extradite the man. So there's really some very, very big power dynamics at work with respect to Russia and their new technology, and Vladimir Putin, who is supposed to leave office next year, although many Russians would prefer he stay, I'd suggest. But what do you think of him?
Well, I think what he's done is great. I mean, he kicked out Berezovsky, who by the way, my friend and the former Forbes Moscow bureau chief was shot 10 times in Russia, taken to the hospital, and he died in the elevator. The elevator stopped, and he was stuck for 8 minutes, and that's where he died. And he was investigating Berezovsky before he died. Now, we don't know if Berezovsky did it, but I suspect it. But these were all Rockefeller Rothschild proxies. Berezovsky, Khodorkovsky, and Niezhlev. And by kicking them out, he freed Russia. And this is a huge setback for them. There was a Japanese politician by the name of Koki Ishii who married a Russian woman. and was close with the Russian government. He was stabbed through the heart